This is the Better Together podcast. I'm Micah.
And I'm Rochelle.
Here we go.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast.
We have finally an episode where we can say for sure this was not our idea.
No kidding. This is
was
so
a
fun.
write-in vote, if you will.
And we jumped on it. We got the email. We were like, yes.
Right. I mean, we get emails all the time, honestly, but they're all about things that we're like, I think you're going to need to talk to a counselor.
Right.
They're not exactly just our expertise. I mean, granted, Rochelle could probably talk to them a little bit in her professional counseling voice, but it's still
there
not
is that voice.
But it's probably not worth an episode. So
yeah. So, and if you have sent us one of those emails, we still thank you for them. It's really nice to hear from you.
It is. And but this one was sent in by a listener named Steven. So Steven, thank you so much for writing about this. It reminded us, hey, we did have a long distance relationship.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It worked out for us. So if you haven't figured it out yet, today's episode is about long distance relationships.
That's right. And so, but before we do that, there's no better time than any to say, send us an email.
Yes.
You obviously don't know if we're going to use it as a topic. So, but the other side of it is, everybody put the foot on the brake right now. Open up your app to Facebook and like us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, I think. Is it a page?
Yeah.
I don't know. We probably haven't paid enough money to make it visible. I don't know how all of that works. I can tell you that like 3 people get to see our posts unless I give them a couple of bucks. But please go like our page nonetheless. On Facebook, it's Better Together Podcast. I don't know the URL, but I'm sure we can put it in the show notes at some point. So send us an email and like our page. Those are our openers this week.
Yes. All right. So here we go. So when Micah and I were dating, we actually did almost our entire dating relationship, including our engagement, long distance.
Yes, and this was the late 70s.
Right.
So
before I was born. No, so we started dating in 2006 and we got married in 2009.
Jeez, you're good with dates.
Hey.
I don't even know if I would have come up with those fast enough.
So we got engaged in 2008. So you can kind of do the math there. So we dated for 2 years and we're engaged for just over a year. And we lived in the same town. And I so wish I was joking about this, friends, but I'm not. We lived in the same town for 12 months of that.
And that was after we were engaged.
Yes, we were engaged for 14 months.
That's right.
And 12 consecutive months was the longest we had ever lived in the same town. We had done summers and my Christmas breaks and things like Thanksgiving break for the couple of days and things like that in the same town. But over our dating relationship, we had, until we were engaged, we had not spent more than 12 consecutive weeks in the same place.
And I will say that when we started this here relationship that we so speak of, that it was, I think I met her like you were interning and then going back to school. And
yes.
I always tell people it was like 2 weeks, but you told me it was longer than that recently.
I don't know if it was. Maybe a month at most.
It wasn't much. And we started this little, we went on a couple of dates and then she told me not to call her. And so I didn't. Who can testify to that one? I didn't. And then later I learned that she was pretty upset that I didn't call her until much later. Which
I would like to state for the record, I recognize was ridiculous. And I also recognized it then that it was ridiculous. So we came up with some things over the course of our relationship that made it work for us. But one thing that we do want to point out, we're actually going to point this out on both the front and back end of this podcast, is that these things aren't necessarily going to be like the thing that makes your relationship work. Some of the things worked for us simply because they did. I would love to give you some great psychological reason why our long distance relationship worked and some don't. But I think the truth of, why our relationship worked is because we decided we wanted to make it work. And because I think there's an element that it's all we really knew. We didn't have any other options. So.
And it stinks.
It does, man. Okay.
If you're honest about that.
Yeah. Long distance relationships, guys, let's be honest. They're pretty terrible.
And the truth is also, I mean, some long distance relationships are in marriage where, the job takes you away for a while and stuff like that. But the truth is it does stink to be away from the one you love. So
my parents actually did that. My mom and stepdad did 2 years where they commuted to see each other.
Yeah. So it's not just dating. So we're going to share a little bit about our perspectives. So in my mind, I stayed and she left.
And also in my mind, because I literally got on the plane and left.
Well, yeah, but you were going back to where you came from.
But my parents had moved here, so
this
true. Was home.
I'll give you that.
Yeah.
She wins that one. Okay,
yes.
So, but from my perspective, and let's call it the male perspective because that's the only one I have, it was definitely difficult to not know everything that was going on. And in her life, I mean, not that you know everything even if you're together, but definitely if you're in person, you're around who she's around more. So I remember, and was Skype a thing back then? Because I don't remember us doing
it. Was, but we didn't do it.
Because we didn't know how, or
we
just didn't do it, I guess.
We just didn't do it. Plus, we'll get into this a little bit on my perspective, but I lived in a dorm, and so getting privacy to talk was hard and stuff.
Yeah. So from my end, I always remember feeling a bit jealous of the people that she was around. Not just the guys, but the girls too, because they always had, she joined a clique somehow. And it was this group of people who had it all together, and they were in a small Christian college, and it was like Saved by the Bell, the college years going on, without probably some of the nastiness. But so it was all that. Well, I was I graduated? I was getting close anyway. Yeah, we
started dating when you were a senior.
Yeah, and senior year of college, you're less thinking about college and more thinking about what's next, which is where I was. So I just remember feeling just kind of trying to figure out what was going on up there, and then also feeling a bit like, what about the times when I'm the third wheel with other people around me, which I remember you had that too.
Yes.
On your end.
A lot.
So, and I love the point that you already made, and I feel like it's kind of the home run point already, so people can, I hope they don't turn it off after we say it again, but the idea is if you want it to work, you make it work.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, the perspective I had was it stunk, but we made it work.
Yeah. So from my perspective, being a girl and the person who was leaving each time, it was, I think there's kind of I only recognized what I was going through and less recognized maybe what Micah was going through. And I did have a really solid group of friends. And I even had another friend who, in our friend group, whose boyfriend lived far away. And so they were doing the long distance thing too.
Did they make it?
They did. They're married today.
Oh, cool.
And so, but I was at a small conservative Christian college and had this great friend group, but I don't know if you know much about small conservative Christian colleges, but people pair off there. And so I was almost always a third or fifth wheel when I was there, and that part was really hard to be around other couples pretty much all the time, especially my roommate and her boyfriend at the time, and then they got engaged and they're married today. And anyway, so that part was hard, and just kind of you're living dual lives when you're the person who leaves. I had this whole life in Pennsylvania at school, and then I had this whole other life in Tennessee at home. And it was hard to reconcile those two things, to make both kind of fit together. But I remember just being homesick a lot. That's kind of what I felt mostly.
Yeah. I know that we started to, we both we're regimented, but in different ways.
Yes.
And so we had to kind of come together with what are we going to agree to do, every day, every other day, whatever. And one of the things we did do was we made the commitment to pray together. And I remember even us having calls when you were living in the basement of one of the things.
Gosh,
and like your cell service would go in and out. And it was so frustrating. So we even did it then where we would pray together in the end of the day. So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, and we did that. I kind of want to point out here, we were in different time zones. And so...
Well, it was only an hour.
It was only an hour, but
You make it sound like I was in Europe.
No, but what I want to say is that even with different time zones, we figured out how to make it work. There were times when, because it was only an hour, but I was an hour ahead and Micah worked nights. Or evenings.
Right.
And so when he was getting out of work was a time when I would normally have been asleep. And so there were a lot of times when I made the decision to run on an hour less of sleep or whatever, just so that I could make sure that we got in that daily prayer. So there are sacrifices that have to happen. So one thing that we committed to doing was we talked every day. You don't have to make this like a weird thing, because one of the things with long distance relationships is that you can get super clingy. And I know I did a few times, to the other person when you talk to them. So I had to learn that sometimes Micah was going to be tired at the end of his long work day. And so I might only get that prayer. It might just be 5 minutes and then we needed to get off the phone. So don't measure the success of your relationship by how long your conversation is. The goal is to make each other a part of your daily lives.
And a text isn't talking.
Yes.
That needs to be said.
It does.
Know, and nor is even just a picture. There has to be some form of talking.
Yes.
I think.
I agree. I totally agree.
I love if there is a glorious part of of long distance, it's the reuniting. It's the coming back together. I remember one time I picked Rochelle up from the airport and she came running. I still have the mental image of young little Rochelle running at me and jumping into my arms and saying saying that saying that she missed me, and she was, and that was really cool. So we definitely, whenever we were together, for the few days or weeks that it would be, we made sure that those mattered, that they counted, because we both of us in our old age back then figured out that if we're gonna be in the relationship and it wasn't headed towards marriage, it wasn't worth it. So we were making sure that we were pretty sure we were headed towards marriage. So we knew that we had to kind of, when we were together, we had to figure out, okay, does this make sense?
Yeah.
And so we used that time well.
It's very true. And I kind of want to piggyback on that. Having been in a long distance relationship, it makes the time, we've been married for almost 7.5 years now. And so you can hear our kids and our dog in the background. But you can, when you've done that, I treasure the time with Micah, I think, more than I would otherwise, even now when we get time together.
That's a really good point. And this is true even when you do business trips and stuff like that.
Yes.
Just kind of the coming back together, celebrate it.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we both made it a point to do was to learn about the people. Micah said that he felt jealous for the people who were with me. So we both made it a point to learn about the people who were with the other.
Yeah, I even made several treks up to the North Pole where she lived to meet these people.
Yes. So you want to meet them and then try to build friendships with them. especially if you can build friendships that are somewhat independent of the, your mutual person.
Which is impossible.
No, it's not.
I don't know, I don't think that happened.
Well, I mean, but you had jokes with Kara and,
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about like you guys went out and hung out without me. I'm talking about like just that you have something a joke or something that's independent.
Right. I gotcha.
And then recognize that other people are going to make up the bulk of your significant other's life. And that's a hard one to stomach, I think, that, when we were far from each other, Micah wasn't the one that made up the bulk of my day. It was my friends there that made up the bulk of my day.
Yeah, it just readies yourself for having kids.
It really does.
Oh, me. As we've kind of said before with the prayer thing, we had to kind of find a way to make a routine. And so now, with the smartphone and all this technology, FaceTime and Skype are so easy. And so you could set up a way if you like to cook, and he doesn't, but he likes to be in your presence while you cook. You could set that up, but make kind of this is going to be my time to celebrate with my significant other every day. And obviously that doesn't have to happen. If it doesn't happen, then there's a lot of spilled milk. But it does need to have some kind of consistency.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what you're talking about is letting there be an element of normalcy to your relationship. That
just like it would if you were there. Right.
That it's not all about reunions all the time. And because that was one of my mom's biggest concerns when we did get engaged was, well, all you've really had is celebrating being around one another. But what happens when you're always around one another?
Yeah, but see, your mom didn't know how good I really am.
Right.
All right, so she's done laughing. I've actually cut the tape forward a little bit.
So if you're talking about marriage, start to consider how you'll be together once you are together all the time. So how many consecutive days do you get together now? Is there a way that you can start to increase that in some way? Marriage is going to put you together permanently. So you need to consider if that's something that actually excites you.
Yeah, I mean, you can feel where Rochelle's moving towards that. Don't force it.
Yes.
It's one of the best things you can do is with a long distance relationship is to treat it like you would an in-town relationship. If there are parts about this that you're trying to force, figure out why that's happening and let that relax a little bit. And then the truth is, if it's not working, then don't continue to put gas in that car,
Yes.
Just stop and refigure what's going on.
Absolutely. So you need to consider, basically with any relationship, whether long distance or in person, you need to be considering, is this person long-term material? Is this somebody that I can see marrying and raising a family with, or whatever that long-term plan looks like to you? Or is this just somebody that I'm having fun with?
And also, just from a different topic, if you are, let's say you're the husband and has to go on long-term business trips, and you have kids and you have a wife, do your best to make sure that you keep a routine with your kids and your wife.
Yes.
That your kids, especially with the Skype and all of those FaceTime things like that, they have the opportunity to see and talk to you every day. A text won't do in that situation either. And while those are definitely not as good as being in person, it is effective. And my dad had to go on several, many business trips when I was younger, and he always came back and made sure to celebrate with us, kind of saying, I know I had to go away. That's part of the deal. It's not a bad part of the deal. It's just part of the deal. But when I come home, I recognize that I'm coming home to my family and that you guys matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not doing that, if it just feels like an ordinary deal, you're missing an opportunity to celebrate with your kids. And they'll remember that. I mean, I remember that to this day. And
That's a good point.
And that's critical. You can buy everything in the world for your kids, but the things that they're going to remember are those experiences they had with you. And you can build those experiences a lot cheaper than you can buy stuff. But you have to be intentional about it. And like I said, I remember it, and I'm sure that my brother does too. And we have both of us have way different personalities. So but that's really good advice. And if you're the mom who's going away, you have a different set of things that you deliver to your kids. So you can't just decide to pull away from those responsibilities too. Do your best to try to engage those while you're away.
Yes, definitely. Very good.
So yeah, a little bit shorter episode today, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
So we love you so much. If you'll give us some iTunes reviews, visit micahandrochelle.com. Book us to speak. We would be glad to come speak. I'll be over this cold, and it'll sound a lot better. And then share this podcast. If you have a group of friends who are doing long distance, whether they are if they're looking towards marriage, just started this up, or they are a husband and wife team that need to hear this message, please pass it along. Share our podcast and this episode with your friends.
Yes.
So, Shell, you want to give them the challenge?
Yeah. So our challenge today is to pray together daily. We have found, we started that when we were dating, obviously. We trade off days on who prays. We've done it differently in different seasons. I remember maybe early in our dating, we each took like half of a prayer, kind of.
Right. It's about an hour and a half, and
right.
we could go to bed.
So it doesn't really matter exactly how that looks, but to make that a part of your daily routine, to include the person that you care about, and what's concerning you. Well,
and I will say what we do is Rochelle prays Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then I pray Tuesday, Thursday, and I get the whole weekend. I get Saturday and Sunday.
He gets the holy days.
So, and that's worked really well for us, because then the only thing you have to remember is what day of the week it is, which is
sometimes harder
than it should be. So, but do pray together. This is regardless of whether you've got a long distance or a short distance relationship.
Yes.
Pray together. All right. Well, let's pray together now. Lord, I thank you so much for relationship, the way that you have brought some people into our email box to remind us of what we've gone through. And Lord, I thank you that you were helping us. You walked along with us. And Lord, I just pray that you would help balance those relationships that need your help now, that are going through long distance or things that feel like long distance, whatever it is. And I pray that you would be with them. And then, Lord, give them the right heart and mind to know if they are in a relationship that has got the legs to go the long distance. To go the long term. Lord, I just thank you that you are the one that brings a marriage together. So I just pray that they would know that with from the the inside out. And thank you so much for all that you're doing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, we will see you next week.